Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to CSOs on the Go, where we are keeping you in the know. My name is CSO Vivian.
My name is CSO Aishat, and on today's adventure, we are interviewing Gabriela Soalheiro, who has worked in the tech consulting industry, and she is currently pursuing her MBA at MIT. Welcome, Gabby.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So thank you for coming. We really appreciate it. And starting off this interview, can you tell us a little bit about your background growing up in your home country?
Sure. Well, I grew up in New Jersey. I grew up in Elizabeth, New Jersey, which is predominantly Latino community. I also went to high school in New Jersey and grew up there. My family is from Brazil. They came over in I guess like the late 80s, early 90s. And I grew up also with very connected with a Brazilian community. After high school, I went to college I went to Penn State to study industrial engineering. And I chose my major because I really loved math and I couldn't imagine not taking any more math classes. Do you want me to continue after college too?
Oh, that was going to be our next question.
Okay.
Thank you for that answer. Yeah, so do you mind describing like your path throughout or your career through school?
Mm-hmm. Sure. So I actually went to school not really knowing what I wanted to do. I'm first generation in the US, so my parents I wasn't really aware of like what colleges were really near me. I applied to 4 schools based off of just names that I knew. So I applied to a few schools and I got into Penn State, which had the most majors. I had no idea what I wanted to do when I went to college. I actually started as undecided. And I took a lot of random classes my first year. I took classes in geology. I think I took a sociology class, and I also took math classes in case I wanted to fall back and study engineering. Because I knew that I really liked math and I didn't know what career exactly with math that I wanted to do yet. So after 2 years at Penn State, I decided that I did want to continue studying industrial engineering. It blended, I knew I didn't want to take any more, not computer science, chemical engineering classes. And a lot of the other majors required you to take additional chemistry classes. And industrial engineering was the only one that only required at the time one chemical engineering class so I didn't have to take any more chemical engineering classes. I could keep taking more advanced level math classes. And then eventually it led to a wider variety of careers. I also considered meteorology at one point, but wasn't really sure if I wanted to be on TV. So I didn't think that was the right career for me. So yeah, that's how I chose industrial engineering, kind of picking off what I didn't want to do and just really focusing on what I did like and what I wanted to continue taking, classes I wanted to continue taking. And then after school, I also was unsure of what I wanted to do. So this is just a common theme of my life, just following new opportunities that are gonna give me more opportunities. So I went into consulting because I wanted to work in different companies. I wanted to help different companies experience different cultures for different companies, work with different teams, and consulting just seemed like the best place that was gonna give me a wide variety of options after school as well.
I agree with your lifestyle. I myself am a person that doesn't really like to do one thing for a long time. And then I also like to experience well, what if I did this or what if I did that? How would that environment be and how would this environment be? So I really relate to that whole lifestyle. And going through that lifestyle, what is one thing that you have accomplished that you didn't know that you would or you didn't know was possible?
Yeah, so I think just being here at MIT is pretty amazing to me, that I was able to get into, I guess, such a well-renowned school. When I started at Penn State, I hadn't even taken calculus in college or in high school. I went to a technical high school where the curriculum was designed for us to take a career, to not really go to college, to take a career right after college. although majority of my classmates did end up going to college. So I didn't take any advanced level math classes. So when I started at Penn State, I was actually taking pre-calc, and the engineering curriculum requires you to take calculus. So I was behind a semester, and I was also taking physics-based calculus at the same time, my second semester, at the same time that I was taking calculus. And if you haven't learned this already, and I'm sure you will, there's like this little squiggly line in calculus that means integral. And during my physics class, I just assumed that that was just part of the design of the book, and I had no idea that that actually meant something. So I took a physics class, and there was math in there that I actually had no idea what it meant, because I hadn't yet learned it because I was taking calculus at the same time. And I think at the time there was like, you got placed into what class you were supposed to be in for math. And there was like this kind of document, and I can't remember exactly what it was, that said like, you know, majority of the people who placed at your level, here's like what they major in. And I think there was like a very small chance that I would actually graduate in engineering based off of that document. Although I don't think I actually read it until I graduated, and I found it in the middle of my paper. So that was like really surprising to see that the chances, the expectations of me actually studying engineering, because I hadn't yet taken calculus when I arrived to college, was very low. But I succeeded, thankfully. It was a lot of hard work, lots of tears, lots of long nights too. And, you know, was able to find a career that I also really liked. And, you know, now I'm here at MIT pursuing something new. So I think, you know, just being here is, considering like everything that I guess like how I started my academic career, is amazing to me.
That's amazing to me too. And the story that you told about how your chances, or the analysis of your results, like you didn't read them until you finally graduated. I'm wondering, I was going to ask a different question, but I just have to know, how come you waited so long to read it, or how come you didn't like, and if you did read it during, like right after you took that exam or that test, how do you think it would have affected your confidence or how you pursued your career now?
Yeah, I guess I didn't read it because I probably was not as organized in the beginning of school. So I just missed it. Or maybe I did read it and I completely forgot about it because I didn't know what I wanted to do. And so it just went in one ear and out the other. But I guess I'm glad I didn't, because I think it definitely would have made me question if I can become an engineer. I think there was multiple times throughout the first, especially, and I'm sure you'll hear this as you like interview more people, the first 2 years of engineering I think are always the hardest, because they have what they call the weed out classes, which are purposely meant to be extremely hard. And a lot of people that I initially started studying with engineering with eventually actually chose a different major. So I'm glad I didn't know that, because I feel like it was ignorance is bliss at that point. And I had questioned a lot if I wanted to do engineering throughout school. I had lots of moments where I was like, I think I'm going to change my major. And so I'm glad I didn't know that I was a little behind in math.
Wow, I think it's fate, maybe. You know, like, and I'm just really glad that the path that you took is the one that you took, because obviously you're in a really successful field right now. So I know earlier you mentioned that you did consulting. Do you mind describing that, or what that is for some who don't know?
Yeah. So consulting is, I guess, like the doctors of companies. You generally go to a company and they usually have some kind of issue, and you're there to help them solve their issue. You usually work for a company that maybe places you on different projects, and you work with different teams and different managers. So there's different types of consulting too. I specifically worked in technology consulting, so I helped companies implement new technology to capture employee data. So I guess like one example is I worked for a rental car service company, that a very large rental car service company that's across 30 different countries, and they were not able to run a report to figure out how many people worked for them at that moment. So they had no idea how many employees actually worked for them, how many were male, how many were female. And, you know, that just kind of leads to like a huge range of issues that people talk about today. Like, what's the wage gap between men and women? How does this change from country to country? So they didn't have a way to run a report that told them how many employees worked for them at that specific moment. So what my team did is we were there for a year and a half. We implemented a new technology for them, where all the employees worldwide would be entering their information into the same system. So in one minute, like the CEO of the company or anyone at the company can run a report to see how many people actually work there. And like also, you know, you can generate a lot more data with that around like what's the ratio of male to female, what's the ratio of the different ethnicities that work for us, what's the wage gap, like with the compensation. So that was one project that I did, was just kind of amazing that we were able to do that, because previously it took them a very long time to figure out how many employees worked for them. And by that time that they did figure it out, the number was completely different because there was so much turnover in that field.
Sometimes it surprises me that sometimes in leadership roles, some leaders need help leading. And I feel like that's a pretty big sector of leadership, is being able to take help when you actually really need it. And moving on from your life in consulting, how has your life in consulting differed now that you're in a MBA program at MIT? Like, how has it differed, and what do you like about the difference, and what surprised you at first?
Yeah, so I guess my life was very different before because I was traveling a lot for work. I was traveling almost every week, and now I get to sleep in the same bed. Well, also the pandemic helped as well, but get to sleep in the same bed for a few months, I was sleeping in a lot of different places before, different hotels. So I think my lifestyle has definitely changed. But business school is a lot more, a lot of work, a lot of managing like what I want to do. You have a lot of opportunities to try new things. And I think I appreciate school a lot more now than I did when I was in undergrad. So a few weeks ago, there was like, I have a few classes on Friday, but not many, but there was like a workshop that was offered on Friday, where it was like a 4-hour workshop, a coding workshop, where I don't think in undergrad or previously I would ever take a 4-hour coding workshop, but I decided to spend my Friday taking a 4-hour coding workshop. So I think I'm much more thoughtful about learning and wanting to soak up as much information as possible right now in this environment. And I guess I'm hoping after school, I'm actually want to go back into consulting. So just a different type of consulting. But I want to go back into consulting. So I'm hoping to soak in as much as possible, learn about different areas of business that I didn't learn in undergrad, such as like finance and strategy and marketing, and using that knowledge to kind of like push my career. I guess one of the things that is my, I guess, motto is like to always be learning and always be challenging myself. And I just want to keep pursuing that. So I guess the lifestyle is different because I was traveling a lot, you know, I was working with a team, and now I'm kind of back on my own. I can do what I want and opt into learning, to more learning. And also like there's so many different opportunities that sometimes it's hard to pick what you're gonna actually spend your time doing this week.
Yeah, I agree. But you did mention that you are planning on going back into consulting, but a different type of consulting. How that type of consulting differ from the one that you previously just left?
Yeah, so I want to go into what's known as strategy consulting. So strategy consulting kind of comes before I guess like the tech consultants come in. The strategy consultants, the projects are usually much shorter. They're like a month or a month and a half. And a company will give you a very vague problem, and usually very, very vague. And you do an analysis of their problem, and then you propose a solution, but you're not actually there to you may be there, but most likely you're not actually there to see the solution through. So you kind of just give the recommendations as to what they should do. And then they kind of are up to on themselves to now like lead that implementation. Whereas before I was actually like leading the implementation and helping my clients decide what to do with like the technology. So this is like a little bit more ambiguous and vague and a little less concrete on like what the actual solution or recommendations that we may be giving.
So you said that strategical consulting or strategy consulting doesn't like really allow you to see the payoff. So when comparing it to technical consulting, did you did seeing that payoff feel like, how did that make you feel? And like, will you miss seeing the payoff?
That is a great question, and I guess one that I'm going to find out. Yeah, I think it's definitely going to be very different to not see the payoff. I'm not sure. I guess that's a really great question. I think that, you know, one thing that is different is that with strategy consulting, you have like a bigger influence over like how the company moves forward, whereas like tech consulting was a little bit more, because it's a little bit more concrete, you had more of an influence in a certain part of the company. You know, when there was a point where we call it go live, where during the implementation of the technology, this is the point where like they stop using the old one and they start using the new one, and everyone is changing, and it's like a big, you know, like you're building up to this moment in time, and all of a sudden they do the switch. It's always really great to be part of that moment. So when the company actually switches, there's lots of celebration, everyone's extremely exhausted. You might have been working late, there might have been some last minute fires that you had to put out, but that celebration of the end always feels really great. And even the project that I was on before I started school was a project that was going to go on for 3 years, and there was 4 different go lives for each continent of where the company is implemented, and I was part of the first 2 go lives. And then I went back to school, and even my client just went live on their 3rd go live like 2 weeks ago. And I texted them and I said, congratulations. And they texted me, and we were still celebrating with them. So it's definitely going to be different. I will see how much I actually enjoy it. There's still a few different things that I'm also considering after business school too, which is potentially going into product management, which is a little bit more like, I think my role, like technology consulting, in the sense that you would work with a product and you get to decide, maybe based on data, maybe based on intuition, how you're going to shape that product. So just thinking of like Spotify, and I don't know if you guys use Spotify, but they now have, you know, something I really wish they would do actually is I wish they would create a way for everyone to like share music or like join a session where everyone gets to play what they want and like add a queue. They did like launch a new feature recently, but that's something that I wish they would do. So anyways, so you as a product manager also get to decide like what new features goes into maybe a digital product, or maybe it's a business product that, you know, someone doesn't really see day to day, like users don't really see it day to day. And then you kind of take that to launch too, and you implement it. And then like all of a sudden there's like this new thing in Spotify that maybe shows you the song lyrics now as like you're listening to music, or gives you like random facts. So that would be something that like a product manager, you know, made a decision to implement, and then like kind of worked with like engineers and design teams and other stakeholders to implement. So I guess I'm still considering what I want to do. Strategy consulting is one of them, but I'm potentially also looking into product management, which is also a really interesting career.
So during your description, sorry, you did mention that your partners went live on their 3rd go live. Do you mind like explaining in detail what that means, or what that means?
Yeah, so what that means is that I guess like the projects that I was working on was designed into 3 phases. It was the design phase, the build phase, the test phase. So during the design phase, I would be showing my clients like, this is what we can do, this is what I recommend, and this is the information that I need from you, and what are some of the pain points and problems that you face today, and how can we make that better with this new technology. So that would be in the design phase. We would literally be designing the product. And then in the design, build, and then the build phase, we're literally like building it. And then we go into test phase where we basically give it back to the client. And now that they go through and they try to use it and try to like break the system or like do everyday transactions that they would do to see how it works for them. And we kind of repeat the build and test phase 2 or 3 times, depending on the complexity of the project. So then we'll take back the feedback from they give us, we'll go back to the build phase, we'll rebuild it for them, they test it again, and we may do that like 1 more time again. And then so after all of that is done and we reach a state of, you know, this is 90% of what we want, this is going to function for us, then we go to the process of going live, which means the client will stop using the old system and move to the new system, which, you know, sounds a lot easier than said than done, but in reality, it's a lot of effort because you may have, you know, 30,000 employees and everyone is used to, let's say, do you guys use Canvas for school? Yeah.
We have.
Yeah, okay. Kind of, okay, maybe you use Canvas to go look at like what your homework is, right? And now you have to now your school is going to tell you have to move to this new system and everything, we're going to stop doing everything in Canvas and we're going to move to this new system. But now all your grades have to move also from Canvas to this new place. All of your homework assignments that you did need to move from Canvas to this new place. So it's the process of like taking everything and going to this new place and saying, okay, now this new place is ready for you. Start using this new place and please ignore Canvas. So that's kind of the process of going live, and going live would be the day that the go live date is actually the date that you start using the new system, and everyone in the company, you know, the 30,000 employees start using that new system, that new technology.
That actually sounds really exciting. Like, I would be so happy to finally get that over with. And I think earlier, a couple questions ago, whenever you were describing it, you were saying it felt like, you know, at the very end, people would be exhausted, they would be happy, they would celebrate. To me, that reminded me of like an entire like high school career and then graduation.
Yeah.
With all those projects. So that's really awesome. Like, that sounds like a really interesting thing that I would be interested in taking part of.
Yeah.
So, and so another follow-up question is, what's one thing that you have done in your career as a consultant or anything else that you've studied that you didn't know that you could do?
That I could do. I guess when I started college, I was extremely shy, very, very shy and very timid, to the point where like being in a lecture hall at Penn State with like 200, 300 other students made me super uncomfortable because I wasn't used to I went to like a small middle school and then I went to a small high school, and then being in like this huge place with so many people made me really shy. So I guess what surprised me the first time I did it was giving a presentation and leading what we call leading a design session with like 100 employees or 100 employees from my client's team. So to be standing in the front of the room, you know, trying to take information from one person, and like, you know, merging those information, asking them detailed questions was, I guess, a place that I never saw myself being. And so that really surprised me to be able to do that, not just through like, I guess build up slowly started when I went to college and pushing myself out of my comfort zone, but then doing that throughout my career as well, like pushing myself out of my comfort zone. And of course it becomes easier when you understand what you're talking about to give a presentation on something, but I guess I never expected to be leading a conversation with 100 different people. And, you know, my client, you know, who's next to me is like extremely shy and a nervous wreck before this. And I'm like, no, we got this. We can do this. Like, I need your help. Like, we'll get through this. Don't worry. So like, it's just kind of an amazing feeling to be there and realize like how far I've come.
That is relatable, 100%. Because in middle school, I'm an ambivert, so I'm an introvert and an extrovert. And that seems super superficial, but like when you actually see it play out, like there would be some times where I'm presenting and like originally I wasn't nervous, but for some reason I just get nervous for no reason. And it's
Yeah.
like, wow, I did myself.
Yeah.
But going back to when you were describing the whole process, the build process, the design process, and like I think I'm getting it wrong, but like the process like where you implement it for a little bit, or like you take it to the client and then they tell you and they give you feedback, that seemed so meta because we're going through that right now. Well, we're not going through it, but we're seeing it happen within our county because we have a new system for online learning, and sometimes it's just like they're updating the platform on the weekend when I need to do my projects and I just can't do my work over the weekend. And it's like, wow, maybe it like humanized it a little bit more, but still.
They probably think you're not doing homework on the weekend. But turns out you are. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, I don't know how to explain it, but thank you for explaining that process because now I understand why they're doing it a little bit more and it doesn't hurt as much. Um, so through your experiences through all these different platforms and all these different experiences and industries, have you seen a lot of diversity within all of these places, or there was like more of a concentration of diversity in certain places than others?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, I grew up in a community that, you know, a lot of people their parents had immigrated here recently, like it was a very mixed community. You know, it was like Latino community. Like we had like people who their parents were Polish and they actually spoke Polish. And then we had people who were Haitian and they spoke Creole. So like very, very diverse community. And then when I went to Penn State, I was kind of shocked. I had no idea that a lot of people don't speak second languages. Like I thought that was like almost everyone spoke a second language, or almost everyone's parents like came here like to the U.S. So I was very shocked, and so I think it felt like a part of me was missing, and eventually I found a club called the Society of Hispanic Professional Engineers. And they were a very active club at Penn State. I eventually became president of the Society of Hispanic Professional Engineers, and that club empowered me. Like I remember going to my first conference, I think it was my junior year of college, and I didn't really think much of it, but I left that conference so empowered. And also I met, you know, seniors who were about to go off to work, and one was going to be working for like an airplane company, like designing airplanes. Another one was going to be going to like this huge chemical company. They were going to be moving across the country, and they were like helping me like with my resume, and it's just like informally mentoring me. But I had no idea that this community existed the first 2 years, and I feel like I really, really miss that community. So I recommend, like when looking at schools, that if like being part of like I guess like a more diverse community or community that has people like you should ask the school like what are their diversity and inclusion initiatives, like especially if you're going into like STEM fields, like do they have like I think it's called like Women in Science Club, and you can probably go to those websites and look at like the students who are part of those clubs. And you can also ask about like, do you have a, you know, multicultural engineering department, or do you have like a diversity and inclusion engineering department? So I think it's really important to, at least for me, and I did when my sister was applying to schools, I told her to do the same thing, is to ask these questions about how is the school, you know, creating a safe community for inclusion and diversity initiatives, because that department at Penn State, the Multicultural Engineering Programs Department, and also the Society of Hispanic Professional Engineers, the organization itself, like I don't think I would have been as successful without them. And there's like a very, very clear change in my GPA throughout college, like after I became part of those organizations, because I just developed a bigger network of community that I felt more comfortable with and people who understood me. And so engineering is sometimes a little bit more homogeneous, and maybe you won't find people like you. But that's okay. I think as long as you can find that community of maybe people, if it's important to you to find the community of people that you can relate to. And even the same thing, like when I worked at 2 different companies before school. And I actually found my first job because of the Society of Hispanic Professional Engineers. And I actually, when I went to those conferences, I like met people in the company. And so when I joined my first company after school, which is Accenture, I already knew like senior managers, I knew executives, like I knew high level people and people throughout the company who didn't necessarily, sometimes they went to my school, sometimes they didn't even go to my school, but I already had met like their employees who worked there at conferences. So it already felt like I had this community within this community, which was really important to me. So I think it's something that as I start applying to jobs now again and looking for new jobs after business school, I'm definitely going to be asking about their, you know, the communities that they have for employees, like what we call employee resource groups, ERGs, which is, so I'm going to be asking about that and seeing how like diversity and inclusion is important to them, because it's a really important part of me, and I want to make sure that I see that within the company.
I definitely agree, and I appreciate your answer and all the advice that you put into that, because you know it can be really hard to make it all the way to the top just independently. It's almost impossible if you don't have that network and that group that you feel like you can lean back on and ask for support. So I thank you for that advice. That was actually, that could have answered our last question, or our one of our final questions, which would be, you know, if you had any piece of advice to give to us, what would it be? So if you have anything else to add, that would be awesome as well.
Yeah, I guess don't be afraid to ask, and ask like in every direction. Like, I remember going to school and being afraid to ask questions in class because it was like 1,000 people, or not 1,000, but there was like 300 people in class, and I didn't want to be that person who asked a question. So I think one way for me to like help me with that was if I sat at the very front seat and like right in front of where the professor normally stands in class, then it kind of makes me forget that there's other people behind me. So, and it's just like me and the professor in class. So if like, it's much easier to raise your hand and ask a question when you can't see anyone, when you think it's only you and the professor and the people next to you in class. So definitely recommend like, don't be afraid to ask questions in class. Don't be afraid to ask stupid questions. They're probably not stupid questions. There's probably people thinking the same thing, or like if you are scared to ask the professor, ask the person next to you. Ask in office hours, like go to office hours. They're like also help you develop a relationship with the professor, so you're kind of more engaged and you care a little bit more when you go to class too, and maybe they'll be more lenient when they grade your like exams and stuff because they like you. So who knows? Maybe not, but I like to think that they would. And then also like if you're curious about like a career or curious about like what someone does, like ask them to ask more questions, dig deeper. I think something that I've learned a lot to do over the past few years is reaching out to people on LinkedIn. And you guys probably don't have LinkedIn yet, but I'm sure once you start college you will. And like if you say like, oh, I really want to work in this field, like finding people on LinkedIn and maybe like a connection, like especially a connection that what goes to the same like university as you, that's doing that right now, like I'm sure they'd be more than willing to talk to you and reach out. Or even if you don't have a connection with that person, just say, I'm really interested in your job. Can I schedule 20 minutes with you like you guys are doing now to like learn more? Like don't stop doing this, even if it's like informal. Like I still do this and I still reach out to people and ask them for 20 minutes of their time, and I have like a whole notebook of like little coffee chats that I have with people, especially now that more people are virtual. They're willing to spend more time. Like I just ask for 20 minutes or 25 minutes or 30 minutes to just get on the phone with them so I can learn more about their jobs and what they do and how they got there and what they like, what they dislike, the challenges that they have. So I think don't stop asking questions like you guys are doing this now. Like this is really amazing, and I feel like you'll always get a lot more information, and people will think of you and then reach back out to you later on too, after you start, when you like develop those connections.
Thank you so much for coming to talk to us today. And thank you for answering our questions very in depth and like even adding your own spin on it. And we really appreciate you coming on. I'm like very grateful. And that's the end of today's adventure, everyone. Big thank you to Gabby, and thank you.
Thanks for having me. This was amazing. This was a lot of fun.
And be sure to hit the like and subscribe button. And yeah, I don't know.
CSOs out.
Yeah.